there, and welcome to this episode of the Carer Project podcast. My name is Christine Rowland, and I'm joined today by Gun Grand.
Hello.
And Alison Weirder.
Hello.
It's great to have both of you here to discuss the project with us in some more detail. Basically, for anybody who's listening to this single episode, we've got several episodes of the podcast available that are all focusing on different themes of information that we've found from the Carer Project. So hopefully this will act as a standalone episode, but if you want to find out more information, go back to some of the other podcast episodes that we've got available, or have a look on the website for other materials. For now, Gun, would it be helpful for any new listeners if you could just summarise a little bit about what the Carer Project is and what we've done here?
Yeah, certainly. So the overall aim of the project is looking at how we best support family and friends who support somebody who is nearing the end of life. And we know that family and friends provide vital support to end-of-life care. But we also know that although this support is very voluntary and willingly given, it can also have an effect on these carers' mental health and well-being. And so what we wanted to do with this project was to look at what are the factors that help improve carers' mental health during end-of-life caregiving, and what are the factors that can make their mental health worse. And if we understand those factors better, we can then start looking at what we can do to improve the overall situation for family carers, friends.
Absolutely. That's a great overview. So I think we mentioned that we're talking about the findings in relation to these themes or categories that we've pulled out. And there are several of those. And today we're going to be focusing on what we've called contextual factors, which is a bit of a clunky sort of title, I suppose. So what exactly do we mean when we're talking about contextual factors?
Again, that's quite a broad scope. So it's factors like who carers are, their age, their gender, their work situation, their relationship to the patient, things like where they are in their life, are they retired, are they still working, general factors like demographic factors.
Sure.
and socioeconomic factors, as we say.
Yeah.
As academics.
So those real concrete features about somebody's life that you can categorise, you can put in a box and tick and go, yes, female tick, or that you can see about somebody and just make a note of, those sorts of obvious things, form filler things.
Form filler things, yes.
And although it's fairly easy to list those factors, gender, age, socioeconomic status, etc., some of them tend to overlap and interact with each other. For example, whether you're employed, unemployed, retired, and your financial status will tend to interact. So I think that's worth bearing in mind as we talk about the different factors.
Absolutely. So what do we know from all this work that we did pulling together all the evidence that's out there available about this topic? What do we know about contextual factors and what that means for carers' mental health?
Well, one of the things we know is that there's been an awful lot of different studies considering these factors and looking at whether they are related to carers' mental health. But it's what comes out a mixed picture. And the only really consistent findings that we have is firstly that being female tends to be associated with having worse mental health as a carer. And being a younger carer also tends to be associated with having worse mental health. That is, older carers seem to generally have better mental health than younger carers.
Okay, and do we have any idea why that might be? Is it in the evidence or speculation? Do we have any theories?
It's not altogether clear. So I think one of the clear implications that come out of this research is we actually have to look at why do we see these patterns? What does it actually does it mean? What might be behind it?
And of course, we are talking about statistical associations here. So while we have found that in general, female carers tend to have poorer outcomes than male carers, and that younger carers tend to have poorer outcomes than older carers. That won't be the case for all women and for all younger carers or older carers. So you don't know for certain that a younger woman will have poorer outcomes. But you might think, well, I should talk to her and see how she's doing. It might be a flag for you.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's key through all of this to consider, you know, the individual person and talk to them about how they are. But yes, it can be, it might be something about the life situation of you know, being an older person versus a younger person, say, when you're a caregiver. You know, you are in a very different life situation in older age. I suppose when you're younger, for instance, a lot of older carers will be retired, which will make a big difference in terms of their work situation. They don't have to worry about work anymore, and how caregiving is going to affect their work, because
because that's not a thing they're juggling anymore.
Exactly, that's not something they're juggling anymore. Similarly, they have less concerns about how being able to have time to provide care.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously people are very busy in retirement, but it's usually voluntary things. So you have less of a concern about, okay, am I able to have time to look after my husband or wife or my older parents? So you don't have that same concern. Whereas if you're a younger carer, of course, you are you juggling work, you're juggling childcare, other responsibilities. You might have big concerns about how is this going to affect you financially. You probably pulled in all sorts of directions. So we can only speculate here. We would need to do more research to really tease out what the factors are. But in terms of age, people are going to be in totally different life situations depending what age group they are.
Another thing that might be relevant here is people's expectations, in that as people get older and maybe their partner gets older or their elderly parents get older, they might expect that they're going to be involved in caring, which a younger person might not have really given thought to or planned for or expected. And similarly, when we're thinking about the finding that women tended to have poorer mental health than male carers, there might be a number of factors that are involved there. One thing is that maybe women take on more responsibilities than men. I wouldn't like to overgeneralise, but maybe they feel more responsible and therefore more burdened. That may or may not be the case. But I think it's worth bearing in mind that in general, in the academic literature, when we compare men and women, women tend to score more highly on measures of distress, anxiety, depression, and so on. So that's something else that should perhaps be taken into account.
Yes, that might also affect the patterns we're seeing. I suppose there tends to be differences in gender patterns in terms of how much you're committed to express, things like being anxious, depressed, and so on. So that might affect the patterns we're seeing as well.
Yeah.
But I think there may also be the element of the expectations we have of women as being, in inverted commas, natural caregivers, and the expectations that women place on themselves. I think, and we do know that when we look at who the people are who are caregivers, it tends to be predominantly women. 2/3 of caregivers approximately are women rather than men. So I think there's still that expectations that women take on that role more. So again, there's a lot to sort of try to unpick here in terms of what is happening, I think. But again, it's about looking at the individual, because we shouldn't expect that, oh well, it's a male caregiver, he's going to be fine because we've got these results. You still have to check, is that carer actually doing okay or not. You have to ask people about the individual person, about how they are managing.
Absolutely, because I think in some cultures, I know that it's the youngest child that provides, the expectation is that they'll provide care, and so that could well be a man, but they don't feel prepared for that caring role, or they feel that role's being pushed onto them, and that, I would think, would have very different implications for their psychological well-being. If they feel in that position and don't feel that they were prepared or wanted to give care necessarily. So it's very much about those individuals and how they've come to be in that caregiving position.
Exactly.
Okay. So is there anything else that we need to think about with the contextual factors, or is it time to start thinking about, well, again, if we've got a young female in front of us and we know they're more vulnerable, what can we do with that information and how can we use it? Or are there some other things that we need to consider as well?
I suppose there are other things to understand more in terms of people's background, possibly, but the results are totally inconclusive. But it may be important to understand further kind of people's stage in life, their employment status, how their own physical health might affect how well they do in caregiving, what they draw strength of in terms of religion and cultural background, and what kind of their socioeconomic situation is. So there is still a lot we need to understand in terms of those factors and how they might have an effect. But again, it's really important to start thinking, okay, well, what do these factors really mean, rather than just blindly going in and measuring everything we possibly can measure and sort of do statistics on them. And we have to think about really realistically, how might this make a difference in terms of carers' mental health, I think.
That's really interesting, and I think it brings us full circle back to something Alison said towards the beginning as well, about how do all these factors, not just individually, what do they mean for the carer, but when we start to bring them all together and create that individual profile of that person stood in front of you, perhaps with that patient. So what can we do with this information? How can we know the few things that we do know about women and being younger, as opposed to a lot of the other contextual factors where there's sort of mixed evidence or not much evidence. But what can we do if we've got a young female carer still in front of us? What does this information tell us that we could maybe do or think about doing for that person?
Well, it could serve as kind of an alert or a flag, as I think you said earlier, Alison, in terms of thinking, do I need to just make doubly sure here, even if this person seems to be doing okay? Do I need to probe a bit more? But I think also we need to come back to what we've been saying earlier, and also what our carer review advisory panel told us in terms of what they would recommend in terms of supporting carers is that you should always take into the account the specific context and personal circumstances of individual carers, but you always need to ask the person.
Mm-hmm.
You can't assume. There might be certain things that might alert you, but you can't assume. You have to ask the person how they're doing and what might actually help them.
Yeah. I think what's probably useful for anybody listening who does work with carers or maybe knows a carer themselves is on our website we've got some fantastic resources. So we've got some infographics, so some little pictorial diagrams that illustrate some of our themes. So if you wanted to download one and print it out, I don't know, but it'll give you the list of themes, and it'll be, if you're stood now talking to somebody who's a younger female or even an older male, you could use that information as prompts about all the different themes that we've talked about in this podcast series for different factors. So somebody will often just go, oh no, I'm fine, we're here about the patient, the person I'm caring for, but actually you've got those tools to go, but how is the impact of caring for you? Is that causing any difficulties or challenges? And how are your finances? Do you need to come and speak to somebody about getting some payments put in place? So we've got all those things on these little posters that can just act as a prompt for those individual conversations, so you can find out about each person's circumstances and where they are.
And it's very typical for carers to say, oh no, I'm fine, don't worry about me.
Absolutely.
And that is, again, one of the most consistent things we find with the carer literature. And it's really important to probe further.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message. As you say, it just comes up, working with carers, it comes up time and time again, doesn't it? No, I'm fine, but it's so important that we talk about Bernie or Jean or whoever we're here about.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, Gun and Alison. I think it's been a really interesting conversation. As I mentioned, we've got loads more information on the Carer Project website, and we'll link the URL for that to this podcast. And you can find out more information on our Twitter or X handle, which is @CarerProject. So thank you very much for listening, and please feel free to check out all of those resources.